So we want to have a conversation about what's on the headlines today. Protest pressure piles. That's the headline on the Standard this morning. Protest pressure piles. And the photo from Kisumu yesterday, and what happened in Kisumu yesterday, where people were demonstrating near the Kisumu State Lodge. There was another meeting that was taking place to commemorate World Consumer Day, and that meeting was being addressed by the Director General of the Communications Authority, and people stormed into that meeting, and the Director General, Ezra Chiloba, had to be rescued from that and whisked away to safety. Attendees had to scamper for safety, and this was in Kisumu at the Jaramogi Oginga Odinga Sports Complex, where the protesters stormed into that meeting, and they went into the food tent and they helped themselves to the food as consumers, celebrating Consumer Day. Now, to have the conversation, we'll be joined by two people. Odoyo Owidi is the new chairman of the Lake Victoria South Waterworks Development Agency, and Arnold Maliba is a public policy analyst. Arnold caught up in the rain. Odoyo flown in. Good morning, Odoyo.
Good morning, my brother.
Good to have you back on the show.
Thank you.
Congratulations on your new appointment.
Thank you, sir.
Now you're chairman.
I was one before too.
You know, that is it. You have your new position in life is chairman.
It's been chairman all along.
It's just chairman. If you're not chairman of this, you're chairman of the other, or chairman of both, this and the other. To welcome you to the show, City has the day's proverb.
I do. Ooh. Proverbs are the palm oil with which words are eaten.
Proverbs are the palm oil with which words are eaten. And this is a proverb from the book Things Fall Apart
By Chinua Achebe. Yes.
You know,
there is a phrase that has been made common and public, and it's quoted on and rephrased about a picture being able to communicate more than 1,000 words. Well, proverbs also have their space. They make palatable conversation, and they also expand the perspectives on a conversation. So, as Ndu explained earlier on, the role of palm oil and how it is that it is used to, should we say, make the food more savory, and it adds that little oomph to whatever one is eating. So proverbs do the same thing.
Ya kuteremsha,
yes, na kulainisha mambo, so that things that ordinarily might
na ladha.
So things might be a little difficult to digest, should we say they're easier then to digest. Yes.
In these communities where we don't have palm oil, what is it that you'd use in the place of palm oil?
What you'd use
kuteremsha hii chakula.
Kuteremsha chakula. Well, some communities would use milk.
Indeed.
Some would use a certain type of vegetable cooked in a particular way.
Kuteremsha.
Yes. Because in my community, for instance, you consider ugali staple, but there are things that make ugali a lot easier to eat. So when you have them, that ugali now really
can go down.
It really does a wonderful trip.
Like uji and jugu.
Yes.
Uji and jugu for ugali.
Yes.
With ugali.
Yes.
Or anything else.
Hey. Arnold Maliba, good morning.
Morning, how are you?
Karibu sana.
Asante.
So you also got caught up in that traffic, huh?
No.
So you're just late.
Okay,
just
what
because.
did you get caught up in?
I'm not late.
Oh, I see.
You guys came early. Oh, wow.
I see. Ni sawa. Hii nchi tumezoea nini?
It's okay.
Yeah, it's okay. It's okay. Impunity inaanzanga mapema. Impunity inaanzanga mapema sana. Now, a lot is happening in the country. Let's get straight into it. Start with the calls for the 20th. So 20th, something big is supposed to happen according to those in Azimio, and they've said, this is a build-up, and we've been doing a build-up because we're heading towards the 20th. And there are conversations that things need to change before we get to the 20th. If they don't change by then, we get to the 20th and it'll be a different story. One of them, Odoyo, is cost of living, right? And the leadership of Azimio, led by Raila Odinga, have said, bring down the cost of living. One of the ways in which you address the cost of living is return the unga subsidy that was there before the election. That brings down the cost of unga straight up. Address that immediately. Bring back the fuel subsidies. I'm using his words, bring back the fuel subsidies. Because if you bring back the fuel subsidy, then bei ya mafuta inashuka. Bei ya mafuta ikishuka, bei ya transport inashuka, bei ya chakula inashuka. All those things, you know. Open the servers. We have a whistleblower who has said that Raila won this election. And IEBC has not even responded to come and say this is true, this is not. IEBC has just been quiet. Open the server so that it's all now out there in the public domain where you can see whether indeed there was any manipulation. The other issue is this IEBC is now being reconstituted. There's a selection panel in place. The selection panel follows the amendment of the IEBC Act, which changed the constitution of the selection panel. And they're saying, no, this has removed everybody else from this conversation. And this is Ruto selecting his own IEBC. We cannot have this kind of thing. Bring everybody on board in the selection of IEBC. These are others. What do you say?
Now, let's start with the last one. You remember the Sherera 4? They were selected by the handshake team. And when you look at their composition, one came from Mombasa, definitely from the deputy leader of ODM. The other one came from Nyanza, deputy, definitely prompted by the leader of ODM. The other one came from, in fact, was a former employee of Gideon Moi. And the other one, I think it was Wandera, definitely donated by Uhuru Kenyatta.
Wanderi.
President Wanderi, yes. President William Ruto never complained, never made a statement because he knew these were not going to be the electors. The electorate was out there. The returning officer is the chairman of IEBC. And the voters are out there. There will be agents. They will return their returns to Bomas. They will be counted, and the returning officer would declare. But let me also tell you about the proposal by Raila Odinga that political parties donate these people. Suppose the political parties donate these people, and ahead going to the election, all these political parties that donated the selectors of these commissioners get into one coalition. They all get into, say, Azimio, or get into, say, Kenya Kwanza. Then what happens? But you see, these other institutions that we have chosen to donate these people to select the commissioners are there to stay. Whether coalitions change, whether parties die, they will always remain there. But the coalition of political parties have also donated one. And that is also an institution that will remain there. Whether people change coalitions, they will always remain there. Coming back to number 2. What was number 2?
There are very many number 2s.
No.
You pick whichever you want.
There are issues you brought.
Yes.
But watch out to end nja. I think
Removal of subsidies.
removal of
Subsidies.
yes. When you remove subsidies, you are going to use money to subsidize the unga. This money is tax paid by these very Kenyans who are complaining of hunger. Where is this money going to come from?
From their taxes.
Then,
They're already paying taxes.
if you have taken this money to buy for them food, then the government will have no money to do any other thing. Let's look at this way.
That if this money is used to buy food, the government will not have money to do anything else.
CT, we tried this when Uhuru was still in power with Raila on his side. They did it only for less than a week. And they said this is untenable.
Mheshimiwa, that's my
It was
point.
more than a week.
Did they really
Not 22
try?
days.
That is really my question. Did they really try?
Maybe
there were
even
statements to the effect that they tried, but did they really try?
Did anybody actually see the unga?
Absolutely. So this is not possible. Where we find ourselves is a scenario that we found ourselves in 1969. We'll talk about that. So to say that we are going to put subsidies so that people get cheap unga, this doesn't happen anywhere. We have had hunger in Somali multiple times, in Ethiopia multiple times. We never hear of subsidies. We never hear of street protests. They wait for the rains to come. They wait for things to change. And then we get where we ought to be.
What's the name of this country again?
Which country?
Somalia.
The one we live in.
This
Kenya.
This is Kenya. Yes, yes.
So how exactly do we relate what's happening here to Somalia and Ethiopia?
Of course, you know as I do. Let me put it in Luo for you.
Yes.
Sembe ipimo genyamin.
Yes.
Compare states.
Yes.
If it is not done in Ethiopia, it is not done in Somalia, it is not done in Egypt, why would someone come and force us to do it here?
You see, my point really is not giving less prominence to the power of comparison. What I'm saying is this.
Yes.
There's a uniqueness in every situation, and the Kenyan situation is unique. Because every time there's a statement about not there being enough money for one thing, there seems to be enough money for something else. Okay? So I am asking the question, the balance when it comes to resources being allocated, that really is my question. There's nothing wrong with what you're saying. But when statements are made to the effect that this is possible or it is not possible, and yet the discussion is around money that taxpayers have already paid, I'm asking, the best use of this money that benefits the people who pay for it, is this being represented? That really is my question.
Let me tell you, my brother, you cannot get enough money to subsidize food in Kenya. You can't get it.
You're going to have to explain that to me.
You can. In fact, let me tell you, not me to explain. The person saying that we have subsidies for unga, subsidies for fuel, needs to tell us how much money is available and how much money is needed to do that, and how we have failed to use the much money that is needed to do that to do it.
Fair point.
Probably, Mheshimiwa,
So,
would you allow me to ask him a question just to reinforce what you're
ask
trying
me
to
or
say?
him.
Him.
Okay.
I know he should be actually be asking the questions. You said the subsidies should be done because Mwananchi has already paid the taxes.
That is precisely what I said.
That's what you said.
Yes.
And you are sure this money has already been paid. What if I told you that all the subsidies we've done have actually been on loan? So what tax is that Mwananchi has already paid?
I would be saying that you know something I don't. And I'd be saying you have
No, it's out
information
there.
that I do not have.
It's out there. All the subsidies we did, look at that. First of all, we've got a fiscal deficit. Even last year when we were trying to push through that, we were borrowing that money. So literally, we are borrowing, not using it well. We have got a deficit, fiscal deficit. We are putting in unsustainable subsidy and then saying that that is a right. It is of right to us.
All right. Since you've opened that door, let me walk through it. You are talking about subsidies that are essentially being levied on debt. So let me ask the fundamental question. The taxes that are paid, what do they do? And why do we have a situation where this debt that we keep speaking of is always untenable and it's always rising and we are always borrowing and this vicious cycle is always continuing? What is it?
It's exactly the reason why we need to drop deficits. Countries that we consider lower than ourselves, you know, we Kenyans have got this spirit of exceptionalism. And let's talk about our neighbors. Uganda, for example. They have resisted subsidies forever for the simple reason that they cannot afford them. We've been pushing through that particular agenda, yet we cannot afford it. So even as we talk about being levied on debt and what we are raising, where does it go, is that we have not had fiscal discipline. And it's important we go back there. What we've been doing is what we call, I know last year during campaign it was called the Fuliza economics, where we've not allowed ourselves to go down and hit the bottom to know exactly our situation. Somehow we keep on raising some springs that keep us bouncing when we don't know where we are. Would you allow me to actually go back and respond to the question he had initially asked? Yeah. So first of all, I just want to talk about IBC as an issue. I think for me that was the biggest issue for the Azimio team. They really wanted to play a role. The others are actually just a support cast to their biggest issue. But be that as it may, I think the only electoral body, of course, over time we've had, I think Vuitu's was electoral... ECK. Then there was another IEC, and then now we've got this. For all of those, there's only one that he actually agreed, was the IPPG arrangement. But then you cannot compare then when we had about 20-30 political parties and when we have got about 100 parties today. If you were to do that, even corporate governance processes, already here, we are almost aboard. And even making decisions amongst ourselves here, if it were a policy decision, would be very difficult. So how are you going to actually have 100 people, for example? Because every party per right, if we're going to talk about political parties, being entities that are corporate and therefore should be respected, then everybody should have a seat. That wouldn't work. You spoke about having everybody on board. Who is everybody? We have got Parliament as the national Congress. When you look at a Parliament, you see a nation. That every time you look at Parliament, you are looking at the gathering of a nation. The face of Parliament is the nation itself. So Parliament passed the process. We passed a law. That particular Parliament, Azimio has got its members sitting there, even before we talk about political parties. So the issue about IEBC, for example, is at least on the composition, for me, I know that is of concern, knowing too well that this is a guy who actually was part and parcel of bringing in Cherera for. So he still hopes that probably he will have his way, and probably he thinks that somebody else will have mischief the way they played out. As of opening servers, I think that is making noise for the simple reason that this gentleman went to court in 2017. And we are the only country that has legislated even administrative processes when it comes to elections. That even how you move a paper from one process to the other during election is legislated. So, and he went to court in 2017, and we ended up getting this particular ruling, which then IEBC has no option, that results declared at the polling station is final. So, and we remember on many occasions, Martha Karua said they had tabulated and they found they had won. All the results anyone would want is out there. Of course, they'll argue about this mathematic letter about not opening servers because of third-party rights and everything else. But the results out there are as open as they were. So if they had anything else that is different, they would actually be having evidence other than talking about a whistleblower. You do not need a whistleblower if you said you had tabulated, you had your agents, and you did everything else. So why are we now bringing in the excuse of some whistleblower? You know, but that whistleblower does not exist.
When you declare something is open, does it make it open? Because
I think I need to explain to you how this system worked. Give me a minute, I explain to you.
You have all the time. Please explain which system
Yes.
are you speaking about?
In the last general election,
Yes.
elections were done at the polling stations.
They always are.
Yes, just wait.
Yes.
Then there were 6 from 34As. 1 each of the 4 given to the presidential candidates. 1 submitted to Bomas through 2 systems. 1 through the Mtandao system to go to the server, 1 directly to Bomas, and 1 pinned on the door. When they got to Bomas, Chebukati and his team did not rely on the server. They relied on the ones that physically went there, tallied them to the end, and got the results. And the results was the same as the one on the server. When we were in the Supreme Court, Smokin Wanjala challenged Azimio to produce one single Form 34A that was different from what is at Bomas and what is at the server. They did not produce. They presented the Supreme Court with 15 polling stations to be recounted. 1 in Mombasa, 1 in Kericho, 1 in Nandi, and 1 in Nyandarua. And you know what? They all tallied with what was in the server and what was in the Form 34As that were taken to Bomas physically. The opening of the server was asked in court. But when the court reviewed, you have to have grounds for the server to be opened. That here is form that is different from what is in the server.
Why must you have grounds, and why must even
anything you seek from court, you must have grounds. Definitely.
Let me tell you why I'm asking the question. If you're talking about a server that's supposed to house all the information of an election, why must it be this teeth-pulling exercise where people must go to court and this must happen? Why is it not just in the public domain so that we know exactly what happens?
The server was in the public domain from day one. One thing people don't understand about this server...
No, it wasn't.
Okay, wait a minute. The voting took place outside before they went to the server. So if you're telling us what is in the server is different, so as what was out here that is different from what in the server.
The votes are not in the server. They're in the ballot box.
The point I'm trying to make here is this. The discussion we're having about the server, not the server, that thing went to court. The discussion around it, depending on someone's position, they will not agree. Okay? I do not wish to discuss the server, the content, and whatever else happened in the election. That really is of little interest to me right now. What is of interest and what we want to discuss is what is happening now and how it relates to the citizenry and the issues we have. If the server proves to be a discussion that would lend heavily on this discussion, then let's discuss the server.
Let me tell you about the server.
Yes.
You hire me to come and do for you some work with my equipment. I have done the work. I have gone back with my equipment. Behind me, I hear you are disputing. You want to come and... You know that server is only for collecting the forms and summing them up. And that was just to make their work easier. But the whole work was done out here manually. So you come and want to open the server and see how I use my machine to do things, not only for Kenya, even for other countries in the rest of the world. Because somebody who is supposed to have had 46,232 at least agents in each polling station does not have a single Form 34A 6 months after the election had been decided and approved by the Supreme Court. I think we are being unfair. In any case, the President of the Republic of Kenya is independent from IEBC and has no issues with the server. Let them wait for IEBC to come back and then they ask them open the server. But I don't think it is necessary because everything began outside the server and ended outside.
Then generally, in all these things that we are talking about, is the call for protest justified?
Yes. No.
Are there grounds for people to protest on all these things, on the cost of living, on the governance situation, on everything the government is doing? Are there justified calls for protest?
No. And as a politician, let me tell you why we are protesting.
Why? Who is protesting what?
Why
As politicians, let's tell us why we are protesting.
Because I hear Kenyans are called to protest.
Also, we as Kenyans here.
We are all Kenyans. We are being called to protest.
Okay.
And some of us are resisting the protesting.
Okay.
Somewhere in 1969, when Jomo Kenyatta and Odinga parted ways, and Odinga's kingdom was going apart, Odinga stage managed a protest in Kisumu in which people threw stones at the president. And when the bloodshed that resulted ended, the Kenyatta regime was an enemy of the Luo. The moment you become an enemy of a people, their leader becomes their darling. It happens in America, it happens in Israel. Anytime a leader's popularity goes down, they seek war with an external force. What Raila Odinga wants now is a confrontation with the government of the day, so that the Luo he was losing because of being a perennial loser get back to him. That is the game. There's nothing else.
For what gain? Unto what end?
Sorry?
Unto what end?
What end is, Raila Odinga, I told you here before, is not interested in being the president of the Republic of Kenya. He's comfortable remaining the president of the Luo. And when they go away, he means he's losing his kingdom. He does not want to lose the kingdom. He wants to keep them the same box. He has always had them, in which he decides who among them gets elected. Then he runs to government, seeks a handshake, and again determines who among them gets appointment in parliament.
I know Eric wants to go to break. Can I ask a question?
Yeah, I will answer.
We remove the Raila factor, and let's go with the cost of living issue. Many. Please, hear my question.
Okay.
If we remove the Raila factor, go with the cost of living issue that many people have, taken, would it then be justifiable?
The people left will all remain sensible enough not to go to the street because of the cost of living has gone up. It goes up in every other country in the world. Even in the United States, there's a time it was so high. Even fuel was $100 and something per barrel. So this is something normal. We just have to wait for things to go back to where they are. Let's wait for the harvest. Let's wait for the rains. Let's wait for the economy to improve. But if we go to the streets, we are only slowing it down more. When you are going down the wrong road, don't add fuel to worsen it.
I'd really love to look at that question, not in the way you phrased it, for the simple reason that it's impossible to discuss this removing the Raila factor. It's almost impossible because Azimio is leading this particular process.
I'm just asking if cost of living issue is an issue.
I'll get back to that, but let's walk back because history is important. On 27th, 28th and 29th of June last year, Raila Odinga and Martha Karua went out in a series of interviews and defended the government of the day. Said the cost of living then, actually, flour was much higher as it is today. It was at 250. Cooking oil was at 500. And they told us it was out of externalities and it was not about it. That is last year in June. I've given you the dates in different interviews. Quick on, Raila mobilized his members of parliament last year when everybody was resisting the fuel levy that was actually being taxed. It actually had been moved on. As in, we have not done a year yet, but it's changed. So what has changed? The only different thing is that, first of all, we do not have the subsidies, but the prices are lower. To be fair, let us also always look at history again. The highest time we ever fuel was, I'm talking about fuel for cars, was actually at the highest levels in 2008 in our history as a country. It went between 204 shillings and 240 shillings. Then that is the highest we've ever bought fuel. Flour then had gone to almost 300. It actually was more expensive than fuel. During that particular time, we didn't have this particular regime. So, is the cost of living high? Yes. But is it comparable to where we were last year when Martha Karua and Raila Odinga were defending the government of the day and telling people to actually accept? No. We have got flour now much cheaper without subsidies. We have got fuel relatively higher, but it's not out of the window without subsidies. So, are we doing well? Definitely no. Is anybody out there doing well? No one is doing. Is going to the streets the solution? Definitely no. And I will do that by defining what mass action is.
You'll tell us what the solution is. Let's take this break. It's 26 minutes to 9. Kenya's biggest conversation. Well, the subsidy is still there, Arnold. Whatever form of... We argue here on this show that it's not a subsidy. We pay a levy into it so that it can go and stabilize the price. The price stabilization mechanism has not left. It's still being applied to this date. Odoyo Owidi is the chairman of the Lake Victoria South Waterworks Development Agency. Arnold Maliba is a public policy analyst. They're here this morning. We're talking about the call for mass action. And we've heard what the president has said in response to the calls for mass action. We've heard what the leaders of Azimio have said with regards to mass action. Who will blink first?
This is the Situation Room, the only way to start your day.
Conversation continues with the two gentlemen in the studio. So, gentlemen, should there be, there have been calls, and in fact, even in today's newspaper review, we're talking about it. There have been calls for, okay, how about we just hold on a bit? Can we talk? Can we have a conversation? Can we have a conversation between Azimio and Kenya Kwanza leadership? All of them as national leaders of this country, and see how do we resolve issues. Do you support the calls for talks, Arnold?
The problem, talks are not bad. The problem is that what are we talking about? What will Azimio and Kenya Kwanza be talking about? We actually have got a national assembly where, that is our national deliberative assembly. It's a council where the nation gathers to talk. It is this, as in, if Kenya was a village, Parliament is the village square, where we actually have got national dialogue ongoing on all issues that pertain to us. So when you talk about issues that I actually was talking about the subsidies that are actually being asked for and everything around that, and I was talking about what mass action would be. Is mass action dialogue? Yes. But is it within the ambit of what Article 37 of the Constitution actually allows? Yes and no. Because somehow in Article 37, for a reason, the word protest is not included. For the simple reason that protest can actually be two ways. It can actually be violent or peaceful. Mass action has got three parts to it. You have got protest, you've got rallies, and you've got sit-ins. As a tool to force either a corporation or a government or whatever setting to actually listen to you, to pass a message, you've got those three things.
Arnold, force. Why don't you start with express first, then bring force later? Because you're starting with force, and usually mass protest is an expression, first of all. And then the forcing is the desired consequence, but surely.
So when we talk about mass action in our situation, exactly how does it work? It has got two impacts. First of all, it could reduce the level of security and national balance, and therefore forcing a government to listen or talk. Number two, it can hurt the economy and reduce how much government collects, and therefore again force government to listen. But what we are seeing, is it really what Article 37 And that is, already we've got mass action. If mass action, by definition of what we have, I'm not talking about mass action from the sociology definition, where it's actually people doing the same thing, but they're not coordinated. This one is coordinated. It's a new meaning to mass action that was actually brought in the 20th century. So in this particular element, we are coordinating it. But if what we are seeing around is what we are calling mass action, then it is on the edge of the law.
How so?
It is on the edge of the law because by the time Article 37 talks about everybody has got a right peacefully to demonstrate, to picket peacefully.
Yes.
But if we get to a place where people are kicking out people who are in a meeting and eating food, meetings are being disrupted, like the Communication Authority, the ICT meeting that was in a city where closer to where my relatives were born. If we go that direction, that is not protected within Article 37. So, if we are going to talk,
those that have called for mass action have been very clear. We want peaceful protests.
It is one thing.
In every statement they've made, they've talked about peaceful protests.
For mass action,
urging their members to be peaceful.
For mass action
to be law-abiding, to be lawful. How many of these meetings have taken place since January? Several. This has been like the 10th one that they had in the other day.
Yes.
Has any of them been disruptive? Don't use the one of yesterday.
You see, I don't know whether you're talking about the official meetings they've actually addressed. I'd like just to remind you that a day after the press conference, there were simulations. We've seen simulations in Kayole, for example. That is part and parcel of what was called for. We've seen on Ngong Road where about 100 young people the following day went through Ngong Road, went to Valley Road, and they were breaking vehicles and looting in the name of answering to that particular call. So the thing is this, when you're talking about mass action, three things again need to be done. You will deal with logistics. Are they dealing with it? No. You have to deal with security. Are they addressing that even as they tell people to go out and do that? They are not doing that. And then finally, the coordination bit of it. They have not done that. But allow me to just execute my point so that I allow Mheshimiwa to come in. Quickly, today as it is, I can tell you that the Church of Kenya is unable, for example, to facilitate a conversation between William Ruto and Raila Odinga. Because would Raila sit under Ole Sapit? Most likely no. Would William Ruto listen to Ainaina? Probably no. Would William Ruto listen to Okoth? Probably no. So for the first time, the church is not in a position to facilitate that particular conversation. If we were to get to a place where they need to, then you move down regionally. Who among these two gentlemen will sit under Museveni, for example?
Have they tried? Has the church tried to bring
you actually,
and have they failed?
You actually just need to look at sentiment already. How every side feels about the other one.
Have they tried to bring these people to a table?
No, let me just ask you. When people are praying in State House, for example, when government has organized prayers, one side has actually made their sentiments clear. You know what it is. So let me just go very fast. At the regional level, I doubt Mama Suluhu and Museveni, for example, will sit down these guys. If you are to bring in the guy in South Africa, Cyril Ramaphosa, they will say he's Raila's friend. So then the only person probably, if we were to be forced to have a conversation, the only person probably who can sit down Raila and Ruto is the senior most Nilot on earth. We bring in Obama probably. But the problem will still go back to my first question. What would they be talking about? We have got a village square that is parliament. People are having conversations there. And if you want to have conversations at county level, you have got a county assembly. The issues that we are having here have got channels to be addressed. Are we dealing with that? We're having a conversation. Why do we have this penchant of doing things on the edge of the law? That if it's about solving IBC's issues, we have to forget what is written in law, what Parliament has passed, and we have to come up with a framework outside this extra constitutional affair of trying to do things on the edge of the law. As in, why is it that only one man during elections, we shouldn't go on with the elections, we shouldn't go to the Supreme Court, we need a constitutional stalemate so that we do things outside of the law. How can we continue doing that?
Have they broken the law a lot?
Yes, a lot of times.
In this current call for protest, peaceful protest, have they broken the law?
Up until this hour, we can say they are protected within the rights that are enshrined in Article 37.
I didn't ask that question. My question is a simple one. Have they broken the law?
Yes. Can I give you one?
Law? Yeah,
Can I give you one?
Give me one, please.
Okay. We know that, for example, to declare a public holiday, only the CS for Interior will do that. somebody did that. We can actually say that it does not have effect in law, but there is what is de jure and there is what is de facto. So, whereas he might not have the de jure power to do that, I don't know if you'll be able to be here on Monday if you don't come early. So if it has got a semblance of being a public holiday, quote unquote, that things don't move, isn't that breaking the law?
I think you have not heard the real statements made in Kisumu. Nobody is going to go to work. No vehicle is going to get into Kisumu. Nobody is going to open the shops.
Who said that?
Who said that? Is the MCA from Central Ward, Aduinyang.
And he spoke on behalf of...
Let me tell you,
He spoke in the presence of
people don't
the
need to
leadership
ask
of
you.
Azimio.
You just need to have influence to speak to them. They listen to you. They listen to Raila Odinga. He holds no position in this country, but they will listen to him. Anybody who incites the public commits an offense. And when you say these people have not broken the law, recently in Homa Bay, Council of Elders were going to have a meeting to meet the press. And these very demonstrators told them, you are not going to do it here in Homa Bay. And why are you excluding what happened in Kisumu yesterday? And you see, this Article 37 that they keep on dangling all over was not made as a sport, that you picket as a sport. It was not made something for entertainment. And it has to be done peacefully, unarmed. Let me tell you, a fork is an arm. A fork. So when you carry a cooking stick, which we are not sure even what it is made for, when you carry a sufuria, it can kill somebody. And even that picketing, it does not mean you move in mass. Anything moving in mass, even something as water, if it is moving in mass, it can kill. When you have 50,000 people moving along a street, don't you see a stampede there? So these people are out to cause chaos. They want 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 supporters to die so that the government become a serious perennial enemy like Satan is to Christianity. You stick to your Christianity because you fear Satan. These people will stick to their leader because they will fear the Satan they have so created by their actions.
Your Christianity is an interesting one.
Yes.
You abide by faith because of the negativity that would be forced on you if you didn't. Let me ask you this question.
I will answer it.
Let me answer this question. There are conversations that are had and they're political conversations.
Yes.
Because we're talking conjecture. Arnold talks about conjecture and his opinion as though it's the truth and the absolute truth.
Mm-hmm.
In this entire discussion we're having, what really are we discussing? Are we discussing the history of Raila Odinga? Are we discussing the history of protests in this country? Are we discussing the reality of the situation we have where you have drought and we have all these issues that we keep discussing? What are we discussing? Or are we discussing these issues from the point of view of the political divide that we support? What really are we discussing? Because the truth is, everything that Azimio mentions has reality and truth to it. But then the question is, whenever you bring in politics, can you discuss politics and bring in the concept of truth without introducing a contradiction really? Because when people politic, the truth is the tool that is used and bent to suit the purpose, but not in its absolutist form.
What we are having in the streets today is 101% politics. Because everything that we are going to the street for, there is a law that can solve them in this country. We have decided to evade those laws, to go to the streets. We are behaving like a carpenter you call to your home to remove a godia from something and he wants to use a hammer. Because this is a man, the only thing he knows is protests. From the time we ever knows him. So that is the tool he wants to use to solve every problem this country is. Protest, and more protest.
There's a little detail here that we forget.
Yes, sir.
Whenever Raila Odinga is spoken of, it is Raila doing this. The unfortunate thing is, a lot of people seem to agree with him.
Yes.
Including you at some point.
Let me tell you, even cult members can have 1 million people believing in them when the rest of the world know they are wrong.
He's brought in a good way of looking at this. The problem is that I will probably need to push him on the floor so that he can actually define everything else. Because when you talk about truth, what is truth? According to who? So we are here discussing that. You are talking about it. Are we discussing about Raila Odinga? Are we discussing about the history of protests in this country? Are we able to have the current conversation devoid of the past? Are we able to discuss Kenya's problems today without looking at at where we've come from?
No, we cannot.
We are gathered here because we know the past. And based on the past, using the present, we can tell what will happen on Monday.
Actually, Arnold, not necessarily, because even when you look at the past, it depends on whose lenses you're looking at the past through. Mr. Owidi here introduced an interesting topic about what happened in 1969. Now, those who lived through that period, I was alive through that period. I was actually 11 years old. I understand, and I know relatives who actually died in that shooting. Okay? So, for me, it's not a story in history. It's something I have had some experience with. Now, depending on the side, the political divide where you actually stand, you will present that matter in a certain way. I am moving away from that partisan position, and I'm saying there's a reality that Kenyans have. So let's leave sides for a moment and say, does Azimio have any point whatsoever? Is there anything that they're saying that makes sense and that could be listened to?
Up to now, I think no one, I've not heard him nor myself, deny that the issues that are being raised have got some semblance in reality.
Yeah.
But the question probably I will throw back to you, is mass action having the hindsight, or rather the benefit of history? Is mass action, as has been led by Raila Odinga in the past, a solution that can bring down the cost of flour? Can it bring down? Yeah, you are asking, you said you are moving away from the partisan position. So now, from where you sit, it is okay.
So we can be in agreement about the issues.
Right.
The issue is
We have problems.
We have problems.
I think
what's the journey to a solution?
Yes.
Exactly. And I think what we do is that, unfortunately, as such as we've done now, we run the risk of shedding light on the politics around the issue, as opposed to giving direction as to what Kenyans ought to be looking at.
Can I ask another question on the same?
Hold on. So here we are, and we are saying that there are avenues through which these things can be solved. And to be able to point or shine the light upon those avenues, it doesn't really matter who it is that's listening. There's somebody who could learn from that. And I think that's what we do. We run the risk of running away from those things. So now if we keep saying there are avenues to solve it, look, what are those?
Now, first of all, one of those avenues is one that you've already trashed. Why are we making politics look like it's so bad a thing?
Who is doing that?
Politics. You say that we should talk about politics and then there's truth. Politics,
How does that make it
primarily, is a tool through which we govern ourselves, we solve our problems. So even what is happening, part and parcel of it, depending on, you would say that people would say this depending on what side or the lens they come from, and that for you, that is what politics is. But politics is much larger than that. Politics is for us a tool through which we govern ourselves, solve our problems. So first of all, are we able to do different politics so that we don't demonize everything called politics?
No. I'm saying very simply this. We keep saying that there are ways to solve these problems aside from the calls for mass action.
Yes.
And I'm very simply saying, list 1, 2, 3 of them so that we can shine the light on those things today. So that if anything we garner from this conversation is those 3 things that we're saying, Kenyans point at those alternatives. What are they?
I'll actually be very happy to start pointing out one, and it challenges both sides. You can go back again, and I would like us to benefit from history. You can go back to last year, and William Ruto read a statement on behalf of Kenya Kwanza. And at that particular time, he was talking about bringing back subsidies, for example. He was complaining about the fuel levy. The same issues now that Raila is actually using. We have got a parliament, and the parliament we have is a budget-making organ. It is no longer a late endorser to the budget-making process. A budget is in parliament many times before we get it, we as a people. When the Kenya Kwanza or UDA aligned MPs last year were fighting in parliament to do away with the levy thing on fuel.
Yeah.
What has it become? Why has it been so difficult, for example, for them now that they have got the numbers in parliament? That's where to start, for example. What they said last year, so that where I come from, we love chicken. So they say when your chicken has been taken away by the mongoose, you ask the mongoose questions and you also ask the chicken, what were you doing there that early morning? So even as we ask of what the Azimio side did last year, can you also ask the Kenya Kwanza side, for example? Kimani Ichung'wah, for example, led that particular push in parliament and they lost. Can they reverse that? That will just, it might not do so much, but it will demonstrate. There's not so much government can do now, but there is some issues they can do to demonstrate. So parliament, for example, rather than the member for Kiharu, and Ndindi Nyoro, talking about where we've come and everything else, he can demonstrate and go back to the levy issue. It is the same group. Now they have won government. Why can't they walk back on that? 2, would Azimio be willing? And when they do that, Azimio can be challenged in parliament because parliament is a budget-making body. Our budget and how you're going to deal with these issues must be budgeted because the budgeting process is legislative. We can deal with that. 2, the president is complaining about these other issues. He also needs to be the president of the Republic of Kenya. We shouldn't also run away from these issues. He needs to be the president of the Republic of Kenya. He is the symbol of national unity. When, for example, names come out, and the best you can see is Mheshimiwa Owidi here chairing a board somewhere. I've sat on boards before, so I know that the maximum you will make as a member of a board, a chair at least has got a retainer. That retainer, depending on what classification of the board you are, is. So people look at those things. When those positions come out, they should actually be balanced. Let us not run away from that. That is a discussion that the president needs to be told, and no one is telling him that he is the leader of this country. Immediately he won, he stopped being the president of Kenya Kwanza. He becomes the president of Kenya. Secondly,
so where
his
should
deputy,
who should ask those questions and how should those questions be asked?
all of us who are here doing the commentariat, the leaders out there, and even the Mwananchi. This is a conversation. We are a country that has got the Constitution 2010, so we are no longer in the days where people.
What avenues can the
on
Mwananchi use to ask those questions?
Mwananchi just the other day exercised their power and they chose members of parliament. That is the strongest organ we have. Have they raised that with their members of parliament? Why are their members of parliament quiet in parliament but very loud in rallies? So we all have got channels of dealing with that. So parliament is one of that particular, that mega village square where these things can be sorted out. Have you spoken to your MCA, for example, even at county level? Today, the MCA is actually a very important person. When last did we raise these issues with them? So that is just but one. Of course, picketing and protesting is one option given to us by this constitution. But what we are seeing, honestly, is not within the ambit of Article 37. And that's why we are saying, why are we pretending that we have not seen in the past these calls and people die? Why would we pretend? We are just coming out and actually saying the truth. And 2, if somebody is telling you that we are going to the streets so that then so-and-so leaves office. There are 3, but I really want Azimio to do the rally on Monday peacefully. But there are 3 things I would like Raila and Martha Karua to respond to. Number 1 is this: what is the end goal for the protest?
That's the main one.
Yeah.
Let's continue the conversation after this. So let's first get into the news, and we want to open the floor so that we can hear from the public as well. 0719-012-600. Okay, there's the 20th. It's coming. It's Monday. Your thoughts on that? This is Kenya's biggest conversation, The Situation Room. We've been live on KTN Home. We want to say goodbye to that audience on KTN Home, but you can switch over to SpiceFM across the country, or you can watch the show on YouTube and Facebook, SpiceFM KE.